Hey Baylor fans, this is your call to gear up with Harley-Davidson of Waco. Whether you're hitting the open road or tailgating at McLean Stadium, we've got the ride to match your Bear pride. Check out our wide selection of new and pre-owned motorcycles, visit our service department, or shop all the latest gear and accessories to show off your Baylor spirit and Harley pride. Visit us today and find your freedom on two wheels. Harley-Davidson of Waco, where Baylor fans never ride alone. Visit in-store or at hdwaco.com. Sic Em Bears.
Welcome to the Sic Em Podcast, presented by Harley-Davidson of Waco. My name is Jerry Hill, Director of Sports Journalism with Baylor Athletics, and I'm the fill-in this week so that the usual host can answer a few questions. Welcome, John.
Thank you. A little odd. Is this the way you tell me that I've been replaced?
Yes, I'm now the host.
So this is how I find out. Okay,
yeah,
fine. We got to say Harley-Davidson of Waco. Exactly. Love that.
Yeah.
So great. This will be fun. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We've done this a few times, but it is different being on the answering side, isn't it?
Very much so. Oh, yes, very much so.
Yeah.
I do much more asking the questions.
Yes.
It's kind of like knowing the answers before you ask the questions. But this is great.
Yeah. And you'll know most of these answers because we've talked about it. Actually, we talked about it earlier today.
Yeah.
But first thing, John is a native of Kentucky. From Danville. Tell me where your interest in broadcasting was first peaked.
Yeah, it's a good word.
Thank you.
I would say that I can't remember how young I would have been, but I think I was fairly young when I had some interest in broadcasting. And then it really grew up in Danville, Kentucky, and there was a guy in our church named Steve Bertram, who I owe a lot to. Steve sort of ran.
You stay in contact with him.
We still do,
Yeah.
yes. He's a Hall of Fame broadcaster in Kentucky and still doing games for Boyle County High School, the four-time defending state champs.
Danville, City of Champions?
It would be Titletown.
Titletown.
Yes, Titletown.
Sorry.
Between Danville High School and Boyle County, we're off track here, but 23 or 24 state championships between the two schools.
Yeah.
So Steve is doing Boyle County games still, and he was in our church, so I knew him, and he ran the local radio station, small town, small station, but he did everything, and he let me hang around him and made me feel like I was helping,
Right.
where I'm sure I was just in his way.
Right.
But I think that's really where I got the bug.
Yeah.
I just thought broadcasting was cool, and then obviously like sports all along, and mix those two together. Couldn't be anything
Wound up
better.
with sports broadcasting. Did you ever do anything like, watching games at night or listening to games at night, or to do kind of your own broadcast, or did that start later or anything?
I think I did.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
There's no recordings, thank
No
goodness,
recordings.
of any of that. So that's a good thing. But I think I did some of that early. Just you're watching and you kind of, you're either listening very intently to the announcers, or you're have it turned down and you're doing the announcing yourself.
Did you develop a voice, or do you feel like it's your natural voice?
I don't know. I think I'm still developing.
Yeah. Well, my wife says I have, or when she hears me, sometimes she'll say, "Oh, that's your radio voice." So I didn't know if that was something you actually developed along the way.
It's a lot like saying you have a great face for radio.
Yes.
too. So that's one of the lines. But I don't know. I think it's like anything else. The more you do it, the better you get at it, the more accustomed you do. Hopefully you're better at your job just the more you do it. So I don't know that, there's so many great broadcasters that have great voices, but some that don't. They just have the knowledge and work hard and do a good broadcast. So I think that's what we try to do.
I know your love for Cincinnati Reds. Did you have a college that you followed growing? And where I'm leading that to is how Baylor, why Baylor, that kind of thing.
It's very good. Lead in. So growing up in Kentucky, I told you my parents had gone to Baylor, so I knew about Baylor. We were 30 miles south of Lexington, so it's big blue country there, and grew up listening to Kaywood Ledford. You know that name? So Kaywood is the just one of the all-time great broadcasters, and he did Kentucky for 40-plus years.
Yeah.
So I remember listening to him growing up, and I think that kind of helped spark my interest in broadcasting also. And again, knew about Baylor, but had never been down here. The 74 Cotton Bowl, I remember to my dad, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I was trying to understand, okay, why is this a big deal?
Yeah.
So I would have been, 74? I would have been 15 years old.
Yeah.
And I remember watching the Cotton Bowl game.
Okay. You didn't
New
go.
Year's Day,
you
January.
actually watched it on TV.
Just watched it on TV.
Yeah.
But, that was kind of a entree to Baylor as well then. So I would guess, to answer your question, it was UK, Kentucky, because we were so close and everything was big blue all around us.
Sure. Graduated from Baylor in December of 80. And so were you communications major?
Right. First floor of Castellaw.
We've been there.
Yes, sir. It was radio TV at the time.
Okay.
Is what I think is what was on my degree. And then it changed to radio TV film and telecommunications. Now it's film and digital media. It's changed through the years. If you want a great education in broadcasting, Baylor's the place for you, right, Jacob?
Yeah.
Jacob's behind the camera.
There you go.
But it was, I see so many students who think they know what they want to do, and they get here and they say, no, I'm not crazy about that. I'll try something else. There's nothing wrong with that. That's kind of the norm.
Sure.
But for me, it was radio, TV, and never really wavered from that. Got good experience at KWBU, which was the campus radio station. At the time, it was completely student run. And we did everything. And we, the students, did everything at the station, oversight by faculty.
Right.
But that meant sports. They said you can't do football or you can't do men's basketball. Those are the only two that are on commercial stations. But you can do anything else you want to. We said, all right. So we did women's basketball broadcast. We did volleyball. We did a ton of baseball. Softball, when it was around, we did that. And so I think we got some really good hands-on experience as students there at KWBU.
Right. I know you got your start, other than KWBU, you also got your start in broadcast, or at least, TV work before you graduated. Talk about that, getting kind of your foot in the door, I guess, at KWTX.
Yeah, so one day on the bulletin board downstairs at Castellaw, there was a note up on the board. It said, KWTX TV has an opening for 2 newsroom employees. I can remember it. That's what it said, newsroom employees. What does that mean?
That's an open
Sweeping
door.
out the newsroom, But it was up one day, and I was out there that afternoon applying or talking to him about one of those jobs.
Yeah.
And Tom Nicoletti and I, remember Tom?
I do remember.
So Tom Nicoletti and I got those 2 jobs.
Yeah.
And it really was, not in Tom's case, but in my case, it was grunt work. It was doing whatever needed to be done. And I loved it. I mean, it was great. It was a job at a commercial TV station, here in Waco. So I was getting practical experience, which I think is really, really big.
Paid.
And I was getting paid.
Right.
Yes. And so I loved it.
Yeah.
And started really doing whatever they needed.
Yeah.
I was shooting a lot.
Yeah.
They would have me voice some reports. I can't say I was a reporter because they would hand me the script and say, voice this. Yeah. Then started doing more reporting. And then 6 months in, there was an opening on the weekends for sports.
Okay.
And I jumped on that and started doing weekend sports and was still doing, my job was news/sports then.
Right.
So I would come in on my days off and do sports only because they were my days off. They couldn't give me news assignments. And that worked pretty well. And 6 months later, there was an opening, or they made the move to move me to weekdays, and did weekday sports for the remainder of my time there. And it was a great learning experience. I mean, that was 15 years working at KWTX TV. And it was great, and it was obviously covering Baylor a lot. So I wasn't working for Baylor, but I was covering Baylor a lot. And that goes back to 1980.
Yeah. So you were the sports director there for a while. When did you first get a chance to do some Baylor broadcasts, like actual broadcasts?
So this whole podcast should be about Frank Fallon.
Yes.
The whole thing should be about Frank.
If this isn't all about him, we will do one on Frank Fallon.
And this is where Frank comes into the picture. So he was, when I started at KWTX, and if Craig Harper is watching, he'll remember probably the date and time of all this. But Frank was the station manager of KWTX Radio.
Yeah.
So he was in that corner office down the hall there and ran the radio station, and I was there doing working in TV, but I knew of Frank
Sure.
and knew I wanted to know Frank really well and get to know him as good as I could. So in 1984, I mean, we worked around each other.
Right.
He did leave KWTX in 81, came to Baylor. So right after I graduated, all of a sudden he's at Baylor at Castelaw.
Right.
I missed that.
Yeah.
But still a great learning experience being around him.
Yeah.
And 84, Frank was doing Southwest Conference basketball TV games every Saturday. And when there was a conflict, when he was doing that TV game and couldn't get to the Baylor game, wherever it was, I started filling in for him in 1984. First one I ever did was Baylor and Vanderbilt, December, can't remember the date, in 1984. And so Pat Nunley and I have been working together since 1984. So that was the start, doing those basketball games.
Yeah.
And looking back on it, I appreciate Frank in so many ways for so many reasons. But, I didn't have any experience. I had a little bit of experience, but not enough to deserve a spot like that.
Right.
But he handed it to me, and Pat carried me through. And so that's when it started, doing fill-in basketball in 84.
Yeah. Obviously, Frank, mentor, friend, what was that like working with him, like right there alongside him for how many ever years?
So you've heard me tell this story before, but I could take you to the spot on the floor in what is now Extraco Event Center. It was then Heart of Texas Coliseum. He and I are standing there watching a basketball practice, and he says very casually, I'd like for you to work with me on football this fall. And it's one of those kind of lightning bolt moments, when Frank Fallon says that to you. And I said, are you sure? And then didn't give him much of a chance to back out of it. But I said, I would love to if you think I'm capable of doing that. And he said, no, definitely like you to do that. So we started working together in 1987. Frank, I would say in his prime, but he was in his prime the whole time, the whole 40-plus years he was doing it, working alongside him. There couldn't be a better learning experience, than working alongside Frank. And I mean, what a great broadcaster, number one, but what a great representative of Baylor, and what a gentleman, the way he carried himself. I just learned all those things from him.
Sure. And
it was great. So I was still at the TV station, and then doing the games with him on the weekends, and it was fun. Jerry Clemens was our producer, starting out, and Craig Harper was our engineer for the first 25 years there, and we had a good crew working together, and it was just the best learning experience there could ever be.
I should have asked this question before, but was there a Voice of Bears before Frank Fallon?
There was. It was a little different because it was not one. The school didn't have the broadcast. Gerald McCracken is who did games before Frank.
Yeah.
And before him, I'm not sure.
Right.
So some people watching or listening will know and remember Gerald McCracken. But then when Frank started in 1953, even then, he was not doing every Baylor game because he would be assigned other Southwest Conference games through the Mutual Network. And but obviously associated with Waco, associated with Baylor, then that led to him doing every game.
Right.
Early days of the Southwest Conference Radio Network, it was very, very much ahead of its time, put on by Host Communications. It started with, or one iteration of that was there was one broadcaster from each school on the same broadcast. If Baylor played Texas Tech and the game was in Waco, Frank Fallon did play-by-play. Jack Dale did color. Two of the all-time great play-by-play guys, but they were so good they made it work. It was really innovative to do that.
And was that TV or radio?
That was radio.
Oh, wow.
That was radio through Host Communications. And that only lasted a year or two, and right about then, so my first year, 87, I only did the 3 non-conference games. Because then it became this, like the conference games was one representative from each school. And
it just seems odd to me.
It was, but it worked.
Yeah,
I mean, they were so good that they made it work.
Sure.
So there was, if Baylor played a road game, Frank would do color, and he was great at it.
Was he?
He went from becoming the world's best play-by-play guy to the world's best color guy. That's Frank.
Yeah.
But it didn't last long. A&M pulled out of the package. They thought they could do better having their own package.
Okay. Yeah.
And when that happened, everything sort of imploded.
Okay.
Which was a plus for me because starting in '88,
Yeah.
I was working with Frank every game.
Yeah. That's why
the history.
And that's why the football streak begins.
That's right. In
with
'88,
the first
not
game
'87.
in '88.
That's right. You know that.
John has covered 438 consecutive Baylor football games. I believe that's the number now because I know it was, or at least I had seen that it was 429 going into the season.
Right.
We played 9.
Let's don't jinx anything.
Right. So unbelievable streak that John has had.
And let me add, you're 2 behind there.
Yeah, I'm forever 2 behind John with the consecutive streak.
That's a great streak.
And there's no truth to the fact that I was pulling for him. He actually had COVID the week of the Sugar Bowl in 21, and there's no truth that I was really pulling for John not to get to cover that.
That's
game.
a shame. Shame your streak's going to have to end.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I got up off my deathbed to get to New Orleans.
Man, I thought I had it.
I had COVID before everybody else that went to New Orleans who got it when they were there.
Yes, so. I was one of those. So.
Yeah.
John, you've said maybe you don't see yourself as voice of Bears, but you are to a lot of people. Is that a privilege? Is it a burden to be the voice of the Bears?
Oh, not a burden at all.
Right.
It's an honor, and my answer to this, that Frank Fallon will always be the voice of the Baylor Bears. He always will be. I'm in this position now for however long God will have me here.
Right.
Somebody will follow me. Somebody will follow them.
Right.
But Frank Fallon will always be the voice of the Baylor Bears.
Yeah.
And it's a responsibility, the way I look at it. It's living up to Frank's standards is something we try to do every broadcast. Sure. Very high standards from Frank. And living up to Baylor standards. I feel like in this role, I represent Baylor, and I'm a Baylor grad, and I'm so proud of Baylor, so I want it to be the very best that it can be. So I would say it is a real honor and a responsibility that I don't take lightly at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave Campbell is forever the pen of the Bears.
There you go.
So
what... Don't they say never follow a legend?
Yeah.
And you and I did not live up to that.
We did not. So you've had the chance, and there's been, you mentioned Pat Nunley for 40 years that you've worked basketball broadcasts with him. And then really that same kind of consistency on the football side. What's that been like? Just because I would think there's just a camaraderie, a chemistry with those guys that you've had as broadcast partners.
There is, and nothing like Pat and I.
Right.
I mean, we are brothers basically, because Pat is so good at what he does. Pat played at Baylor.
Right.
There is the game where he and Vinny combined to score 62, which we like to talk about, February of '79. Vinny had 50. Pat had 12. But the game they combined to score 62. But after his playing career, he went to Baylor Law School. But immediately after his career was over, Frank tapped him and said, "I'd like for you to work with me on the broadcast," which was a first. There was no regular color analyst before Pat.
Yeah.
And he stepped right in, and the rest is history.
Been there ever since.
Yeah, exactly. So that goes back to '81 for Pat doing that. And like I said, he and I started, I can remember watching him play in the HOT Coliseum, and then getting to work with him has just been so great. I mean, he is Baylor through and through.
Yeah, absolutely.
He is really, Pat to me is the gold standard of what we look for in our broadcast crews, because he knows the game, in his case basketball, he knows Baylor, and he's very articulate, so we really look for that's the model that we look for in our broadcast crews, and we've got it. We talk about football with J.J. Joe. Now it was Walter Abercrombie before him, David Hatchett before him, but J.J. now for 21 years, and then Ricky Thompson on the sideline, and it's Ricky's 25th year.
Right.
So for J.J.'s entire tenure, 21 years, It's been us three and not missed a game.
Yeah,
so
that's crazy.
Whatever that number is through 21 years, that's great. And there is there's a comfort factor there. I hope there's a familiarity there to our listeners. And I hope, they know that when we say that's a big play or that's a big win, we kind of know what we're talking about because we've seen all sides of that,
right.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, that's what I was going to say, was through your time, you've seen a lot of good, a lot of bad. Are there, and I hate to put you on the spot for this, some highlights, some few games that you can think of that are just kind of really stick with you? And I know what one of them will be, but kind of some of your highlights. Or
how long we have?
Most
I got a few.
games.
No, there've been a bunch, obviously, and going through the down times and the dark times really makes you appreciate the good times, the wins, the big wins.
Sure.
You got to say that national championship for men's basketball is at the top of the list.
Right.
What Coach Drew inherited when he came here and what he built here, and culminating with his first national championship, maybe more to come.
Like that.
Yeah, maybe more to come. Was just terrific, and it's a shame that it was during COVID and in the bubble, and the team was sequestered, and we couldn't have a full Lucas Oil Stadium. It was out half full there. So many more Baylor fans would have been there to enjoy it. Sure. But they couldn't, and so that would be number one. I mean, so many other games. Off the top of my head, 50-7 over Texas in 1989 was huge. First win in Austin in 38 years.
It's over, baby. I think
That's
that was
it from
one.
Coach Staff. Yeah. And 2004 A&M overtime win. We'd lost, I think, 19 straight to A&M and won that. Sean Bell to Dominique Ziegler, and that was very, very memorable. It's the worst radio call of all time. But Baylor people knew, but Baylor people knew something good had happened. The way JJ and I were screaming, they didn't know what, but they knew something good had happened. So
I've heard the A&M side too.
Yeah, true. Something not good had happened there. But that was so memorable, and it was great. Shared that with JJ. So those are a couple that come to mind, and others in other sports like baseball, the regional at Rice, coming from 7 runs down. The World Series comeback against Tulane was huge.
You were there for that.
I didn't do that game. Tom was doing it.
Okay.
But I was there.
Yeah.
So many of those memorable games. Women's Final Four, first one in 2005 was in Indianapolis, where the men won their first national championship, and we were doing Inside Baylor Sports at the time. Lori Fogelman and I. Michael Butler was the producer then, and we did a live show on that Sunday from Indianapolis, which was a lot to do, and it turned out great. So that was fun.
That would have been the Sunday
between the games, I think.
Okay.
I mean,
I was thinking it was Sunday, Tuesday back then, so maybe it was after the semifinal games.
I think you're right. No, I think you're right. Like the men's national championship
the men's
was on
Saturday, Monday,
yeah.
and I think the women at that point anyway was Sunday, Tuesday.
I think you're right.
So it might have been after their I guess it would have been their win over LSU.
Yeah,
so
the semifinal win.
That's big.
That was huge. We were outside the RCA Dome and did that show live, so that was very fun.
Well, and we talked about it earlier, but so John talked in my sports writing class, and one of the questions to him was, so what do you do in your spare time? John, he literally does like all the sports. Like he does stuff he does a lot of the third tier broadcasts, but he also does, stuff with equestrian, and I've seen him in the cowboy hat, and track and field. But what do you do in your spare time?
Yeah. I try to, as I told your young, impressionable students, I try to create a good work-life balance. And it takes work sometimes. And Mac Rhodes, our athletic director, is totally supportive of that. He'll tell us, get out of here. Why are you here? You need to be at home. And I appreciate that. And I try to make that work. My wife Terry and I, we've been married for 40 years, and our kids are out of the house. And so if I'm off doing a game, if she's not there, she's home by herself. Right. So I work at that and can always do better. But the work-life balance, I think, is really important. So when I'm away from Baylor, away from sports,
Sure.
it's Hallmark movies or whatever
Right.
she wants to watch
Yeah.
at home or whatever she wants to do. And then we make the most of the summer months when the schedule is really slow, and had a great trip this past summer to Estes Park, Colorado, just the two of us.
Wow.
And she would tell you the best part of that trip was we were there and we didn't see one person we knew, and we didn't see one person that knew us. She would say that's the highlight.
That was the highlight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful.
Absolutely.
It was a wonderful trip.
Yeah.
But just I don't work 10 months and then say, okay, I'm home for 2 months, and then go back for 10 months. I try to make the most of time at home and considerate of her, and we enjoy spending time together. But, when I'm home too. Put the phone away best I can and do what she likes to do.
You've obviously won your share of awards through a career. Texas Coast Sports Broadcaster of the Year, in 2019.
Shocking.
I think you might be the only winner of both the Frank Fallon and the Dave Campbell Award from
That's
the
what they
Waco
tell
Chamber
me,
of
yeah.
Commerce. And this was fun in August. I was actually the presenter of the Dave Campbell Award. John knew nothing about it, and that was so much fun. It was a surprise, right? You knew nothing about
Oh my gosh,
that
I knew.
award.
I was emceeing the event.
Yes.
I have the script in my hands, and that's not on the script.
Yes. And Mac's like he was pretty. Mac Rhodes was there at the end, and he was like pretty much done. And I knew that Mac was supposed to call me up,
Right.
but he was about to walk off. And then it was like,
Right.
oh yeah, we have one more thing.
That was totally a surprise,
Yeah.
and y'all pulled that off very well. And again, nothing against you, Jerry, making the presentation, and Julie
Right.
making the presentation, but my family was there.
Yes.
And unbeknownst to me, they were there and were upstairs,
Yeah.
during the luncheon and
Oh,
came
yeah.
down and surprised me.
That was so good.
Yeah. When I turned over and saw Terry there and the kids, that was the best.
That was the best.
That was really the
Yeah.
best.
Right.
And to have anything with Dave's name on it
Oh, yeah.
is terrific, and
Absolutely.
anything with Frank's name on it is just truly an honor.
Yeah. One more award earlier this month, the Chris Schenkel Award. And I guess maybe the most significant part is that Baylor is now
Yeah.
the only school that has two winners of that award. And, of course, the other one is Frank. I'm guessing that's probably the most significant part of that. I'm not sure if you –
No question.
Yeah.
It definitely is. And Steve Hatchell is the president of the National Football Foundation. He called me one day, and I missed his call. I said, I'm on the air. Can I call you back? And called him back, and we shoot the breeze for a little bit. Knew Steve. He was the first commissioner of the Big 12.
Yeah.
And we shoot the breeze, and then he says, John, I'm happy to inform you that you are a recipient of the Chris Schenkel Award.
Yeah.
Congratulations. And I said, Steve, there's been a terrible mistake.
what have you done?
Right. What in name of Chris Schenkel is going on? But I mean it. I mean, I know the significance of this award.
Absolutely.
I remember when Frank won it in 2001, and you look at that list, it recognizes, a college football announcer who's been at one school for a long, long time. And that list, I don't belong on that list.
You can go down a lot of guys. And,
Yes. Yeah, so many. I mean, guys with Big 12 ties like Bob Berry, Bob Berry Sr. and Larry Zimmer from Colorado. I'm going to leave people out now. Frank, from Baylor. Don Fisher from Indiana won it 2 years ago. Just great names. And I really don't feel like I belong on that list.
Well, they did. So.
But it is a team award, I would say, for our team, our broadcast team through the years, and a team award for Baylor, that Baylor is the first school to have two recipients of the Schenkel Award. And I met Chris Schenkel one time.
Did you?
Yeah, when he was doing ABC football, they would make a tour in the summer just to kind of pump up college football season.
Right.
And they were in Dallas, and we were there, and
that's cool.
Got to shoot an interview with him. So pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
Very cool.
Well, John,
it is. Let me interrupt you to say
Yes.
it is very humbling.
Yeah.
To to be on that list of the men that have won this award.
Yeah.
But again, a great tribute to Baylor, and anything that I can share with Frank Fallon is a real honor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say this, I know those awards, they're special and all that, but knowing John like I do, I know that his family is more important than any of that. John and his wife Terry, mentioned Terry, they have 3 children, all Baylor grads.
Yes.
Right? And 4 grandchildren, all future Baylor grads.
Yes. And a 5th on the way.
Okay,
let's
there we
break
go.
that news.
There we go.
Yeah.
And you are Mo.
Yes,
Is that
I'm
right?
Mo. She is Shug.
Shug?
Terry is Shug, and I am Mo.
That's fantastic.
So, and there's nothing like family. Boy, that is the best. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I got the privilege of being at his 40th
Yeah.
anniversary party, which was a lot of fun, thrown by his children. So
Proud of Megan, our oldest daughter, is married to Ty Beard with Baylor basketball, which is really fun. Ty and I are together a lot, especially during basketball season. And Truett and Turner are their 2 boys. And Maddie is our middle daughter. And Maddie Wellborn, married to Art Wellborn.
He was a great singer.
He's very good, very talented. And Wesley and Ruby's parents.
Yes.
And a 3rd on the way.
Yes.
So in the spring, which is great. And MJ is our son. MJ is married to Caroline, and they're in Dallas. He works in Dallas.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, John, I'm going to turn it over to you next week. This is my one and only host segment for
I thought
Sic
I'd
Em
been
Podcast,
replaced.
presented by Harley Davidson of Waco. For John and Jacob and the rest of the crew, I'm Jerry Hill, and this has been the Sic Em Podcast, presented by Harley Davidson of Waco. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Jerry.